Professional bodybuilding is going through a tense moment, full of questions and mixed feelings. Over the past few months, extreme physical changes, unexpected comebacks to the stage, and numbers that seem more and more unreal have all happened at once, creating an atmosphere of curiosity and even concern among fans. On top of that, controversies involving well-known athletes and increasingly frequent debates about judging criteria only add to the sense of uncertainty. What is actually being rewarded on today's stages? Aesthetics, sheer size, extreme conditioning, or all of it at the same time? One of the announcements that really caught people's attention recently was Sadik Hadzovic's return to classic physique. After years competing in men's physique, he decided to go back to the division that marked a key chapter of his career. For longtime fans, that move instantly sparks curiosity and a strong sense of nostalgia. Before stepping away from classic, Sadik built a solid resume. He finished as runner-up multiple times in men's physique, consistently behind Jeremy Buendia, before eventually switching divisions. In 2016, the very first official year of classic physique at the Mr. Olympia, he placed third. Then in 2017, he came back even better and took second place, in an era that looks completely different from today's classic scene. After that, Sadik was off the classic radar for about 8 years. During that time, classic physique evolved in a brutal way. Athletes got thicker, fuller, and brought a much higher level of muscle maturity. That completely changes the landscape for anyone trying to come back now, especially someone known for a more aesthetic, refined look. Looking at Sadik's current physique, a few things stand out right away. He still has a tight waist, clean lines, and that classic look that hits well at first glance. On the other hand, there are limitations that are hard to ignore, like abdominal asymmetry and a noticeable lack of muscle density compared to today's top classic competitors. That naturally raises an uncomfortable question. How much did he really evolve during all those years away from the division? That question gets even bigger when you factor in the aggressive bulking phase he seems to be going through. Is that really the right path for the modern classic physique, or an unnecessary risk? Sadik has already made it clear that the Pittsburgh Pro is off the table because it's too early, pointing instead to a competitive return closer to mid-year. Now the big question is, will this new version of Sadik be enough to compete at a high level in today's classic landscape? One of the most sensitive topics being discussed right now involves Hadi Choopan and his confirmed appearance at the Arnold Classic. While his name remains on the competitor list, what's drawing the most attention isn't his physique or his prep, but his complete silence regarding the serious political crisis unfolding in Iran. In recent weeks, Iranian influencers and media pages have publicly called for Hadi to be removed from the event. Their main argument is that by not speaking out, and by maintaining visual associations with figures tied to the regime, he is indirectly supporting local authorities. This becomes even more delicate when other well-known Iranian athletes have chosen to openly speak out in support of the people. At the same time, the video raises an important counterpoint: personal risk. Unlike athletes who live abroad, Hadi has deep ties to Iran, family, history, and very real potential consequences if he were to take a public stand against the government. That reality adds a layer of complexity that makes simplistic judgments about the situation impossible. Still, the weight of silence takes on a different meaning when you consider who Hadi is today. He's not just another pro athlete. He's a Mr. Olympia, one of the most recognizable bodybuilders in the world, with massive global reach. For many fans, that level of influence also comes with a proportional level of responsibility, and that's exactly where the controversy intensifies. The big question is a straightforward one. Will the Arnold Classic take any action? All signs point to no. Even so, regardless of any official decision, the situation has already impacted Hadi's public image and sparked debates that go far beyond the stage. At what point does silence become self-protection? And when does it start being seen as a statement? Another topic that has sparked a lot of discussion recently is the direct comparison between Mike Summerfeld and Ramon Dino, especially when the focus is on back poses. It all started after comments that were reportedly attributed to Neil Hill, suggesting a clear winner in a specific pose, something that was later partially walked back. Even with the confusion surrounding those statements, the video makes one thing clear: a technical, pose-by-pose analysis is still totally valid. When we look specifically at the back double biceps, several details stand out and help explain why this debate has gained so much traction among fans, coaches, and analysts. In terms of width, Mike Summerfeld has a visual advantage that's hard to ignore. His back structure creates a wider frame, with lats that flare more effectively in the pose, giving an immediate sense of dominance. In technical judging, that kind of visual impact often carries a lot of weight, especially in direct comparisons. When it comes to depth and density, the discussion gets even more interesting. Mike appears to have thicker back musculature, with greater separation and a more three-dimensional look. His muscles seem to pop more to the judge's eyes, while in Ramon's case, that same effect comes across in a more subtle way from this specific angle. That naturally leads to an unavoidable question: are judging criteria being applied consistently? When width, depth, and density seem to favor one athlete, but the decision goes to another, the debate only gets louder. Now let's talk about Joe Palacios' physique. He showed up weighing around 300 pounds, roughly 136 kilos, even in the off-season, and already in impressive condition. That number alone grabs attention, but what really stands out is how that weight is distributed across his frame. Even without classic aesthetics or a tight waist, Joe more than makes up for it with absolutely insane overall mass. His muscles look dense, hard, and extremely mature, giving off that raw, brute force look that defines the open division. This isn't a physique built to impress with lines. It's built to dominate through sheer size. Another clear standout is his back potential. Even without fully showcasing it in every update, it's obvious that this is his biggest weapon. Thickness, width, and depth all point to a back that could make a serious impact once fully dialed in. That's exactly why expectations are growing around his next competitive appearance. The takeaway from the video is straightforward. If Joe shows up as conditioned as he's promising, he has a real shot at winning a pro show and punching his ticket to the Mr. Olympia. For anyone following his recent progress, that wouldn't come as a surprise at all. Among all the recent updates, one that really stood out was Sam Sulek's. The images show a physique with insanely full arms, an outrageous pump, and a level of density that immediately jumps out. Visually, from certain angles, he's already starting to look much more like an open competitor than a classic athlete. The initial impact is impossible to ignore. Size, hardness, and overall stage presence make his physique impressive even outside of competition. Wide lats, dominant traps, and arms that seem to grow with every appearance create that freak factor effect that grabs the audience's attention and naturally leads to comparisons with much heavier athletes. That said, when the analysis shifts to the specific criteria of classic physique, some clear limitations show up. Aesthetic lines aren't his strong suit, symmetry falls short in certain poses, and the highly valued classic X-frame simply doesn't stand out clearly. Those elements matter a lot when he's compared to the very best in the world. Because of that, expectations for the Arnold Classic are fairly realistic. The takeaway from the video is that Sam is unlikely to fight for the top spots. At the same time, it's also unlikely that he'll finish dead last. There's definitely a chance he could surprise people by beating a few more established names, especially if he shows up extremely conditioned. All of this leads to the central debate. Where does Sam Sulek's real future lie? Does he still make sense in classic physique, or is he just delaying an inevitable move to the open division? With just a few weeks to go before the Arnold Classic, a new update from Mike Summerfeld dropped like a bomb in the classic physique scene. The physique on display is described as overwhelmingly dominant, with size, density, and muscle maturity that grab attention instantly, even from those who are used to seeing big bodies in this division. But along with the visual shock comes a potential problem that could completely change the outcome: the weight cap. The video raises questions about Mike's official height and how that directly affects his allowed weight limit. Small differences in measurement can mean several pounds, or a few kilos, more or less on stage, and at this level, that makes a huge difference. The real danger appears if Mike has to rely on aggressive dehydration to make weight. Extreme last-minute tactics might work on paper, but they often come at a high cost to the final look. Loss of fullness, reduced density, and a flat appearance are common consequences when an athlete has to push that adjustment too far. Even so, despite this big question mark, what we see in the update is a physique that borders on unbeatable under today's classic criteria. The combination of size, muscle separation, and overall presence gives him a clear advantage in almost every pose, as long as he can step on stage without compromising the look. Another name showing up in the video with eye-popping numbers is Michael Kizo, who's currently weighing around 140 kilos, roughly 308 to 312 pounds, right in the middle of the off-season. At first glance, that number alone grabs attention, but with Kizo, off-season updates rarely tell the full story. Unlike many athletes, Kizo almost never looks impressive outside of contest prep. In the off-season, he shows up big and heavy, but without that dry, full, detailed look that usually shocks fans. Because of that, a lot of people tend to underestimate him months before competitions, assuming he's not on the same level as other top open guys. Recent examples back this up. At the Prague Pro, for instance, Kizo didn't look threatening weeks out, but once he stepped on stage, he was completely transformed. Dry, full, dense, and with conditioning that caught a lot of people off guard. This pattern has repeated itself more than once throughout his career. Wrapping up the string of updates, let's talk about Nick Walker, who recently posted new footage focused entirely on his lower body. Right away, one thing is clear. There has been a noticeable improvement in his quad sweep, with more roundness and lateral fullness than in previous appearances. That progress stands out because, for a long time, Nick's legs were considered one of the more questionable aspects of his physique. Heavy, consistent training is starting to pay off, especially on the outer quad, which now looks fuller and more present in front poses. That said, the video makes it clear there are structural limitations that are hard to overcome. Short muscle insertions cause the quad to end earlier, which limits the visual impact of the sweep no matter how much size he adds. This isn't a lack of mass issue, it's genetics and bone structure. So let's be honest, Nick's legs aren't perfect, but they're also not his biggest competitive problem. Within the context of the open division, they do their job and don't automatically put him at a disadvantage against other top athletes. The real critical issue lies elsewhere. Midsection control, waist width in certain poses, and overall stage presentation remain the factors most likely to cost him important placings. After looking at all these cases, one thing becomes clear. Professional bodybuilding is living through an extreme, high-contrast phase. On one side, we see athletes getting bigger than ever, hitting body weights that once seemed unthinkable. On the other, we see unexpected comebacks and career decisions that challenge the sport's traditional logic. At the same time, factors far beyond the physique are now shaping the conversation. Political controversies, public image, and fan expectations are walking side by side with training, diet, and contest prep. The stage is still the center of everything, but the surrounding context has never mattered more. Technical debates are also gaining momentum. Pose-by-pose comparisons, judging criteria discussions, and razor-thin decisions show a sport that's constantly evolving, and not always in clear or unanimous ways. And that's exactly where this type of video fits in. The goal isn't to give final answers, but to connect the dots, raise questions, and spark reflection. Is bodybuilding simply evolving, or pushing into new territory? Now I want to hear from you. What stood out to you the most in these updates? Which of these cases says the most about the future of the sport? Drop a comment, join the discussion, and if you enjoy this more direct, breaking news style, make sure to stick around for the next videos.